You're listening to ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio, with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. This episode is sponsored by Dynamics 365 UG. The user group for Dynamics 365 and Dynamics CRM community is powered by users, for users, and specializes in the delivery of member-driven education, networking, and events to help you maximize your current Microsoft Dynamics investment. Visit them online at crmug.com.
Hello, Mr. Lindstrom. How are you feeling today?
Well, I'm doing good. It's right before Thanksgiving, so I'm getting in a thankful mood. So I thought in the spirit of Thanksgiving, maybe we should do a little grab bag episode. Productivity
Sounds good to me. I think there are many things to be thankful for on the productivity front. So, I'll get stuff started if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. Go
All
first.
right, so I think the first one, and I'll start inside of Outlook, and this one is the email copy to calendar feature. Let me set up kind of how and why I use this. So I'll oftentimes have email threads that go back and forth with people where we talk about something that we end up deciding, you know what, we're going to have a meeting around this thing to try to, cut through the back and forth email. And I always want to capture some of that context of what we're talking about. So what you can do is within Outlook, you can copy an email to another folder. So you could send a copy to an archive folder or what have you, but you can also copy into your calendar, and it'll create a calendar appointment for that. And it includes all of the thread, all of that history of those things that you wanted to talk about. And you don't have to try to copy and paste it or pull it from the other item. And it keeps a consistent connection between those items.
Okay, so when you do that, I think there's two different ways to do it. You can hit the copy button, but you can also just drag it over to the calendar.
So I do none of the above. I do a control. I can do a
Really?
Control Shift Y, which is the keyboard shortcut for copy, and then I select calendar. So it's an all keyboard action for me.
I would argue that my approach takes less action though, because if you do the Control Shift Y, then you got to scroll down to the calendar, right?
Well, I mean that's true that you do, but for me it's Control.
I just drag this little email over to the little calendar guy, and boom, I got an appointment.
Well, I mean that's totally fair if your hand is hovering over the mouse, but I'm usually over the keyboard, so Control Shift Y down because calendar is usually 2 below the folder I've been on. Enter. So I mean, it's a lot of work to lift up my hand and go all the way over to the mouse.
You don't have as many folders as I do.
That's true. That's why the beauty of the single archive folder.
Yes. Okay. So that's good. I got one. So I've got these recurring meetings with projects I work on, and what happens is they invariably use WebEx, which is a fine service if you like 13-digit codes that you have to remember to type in. And if you are if you're sitting in front of your computer, you can launch WebEx and have it call you or use the integrated audio. That's fine. But say you're on the go, say you're in your car, say you're at the airport waiting for your flight. Invariably, the link to the phone number won't be a link, and then it has an ungodly long number you got to type in. So one thing I've started to do is for those recurring meetings, I'm creating a contact for those meetings with the number, comma, and the code.
Okay.
And that's a big time saver because, even when I'm in the office, sometimes if I've got to go to the WebEx, say I've got a meeting that runs up right up to the next meeting, I will be late to the meeting because I'm entering in all the codes and everything. So being able to do that, click on it, dial it, it saves a lot of time and frustration. I wouldn't do that if I had just a one-off meeting, but if you have multiple meetings with the same people, a lot of times they'll use the same WebEx for that. So it's a big saver.
Yeah, I was thinking on that, the recurring aspect of it. It makes sense to use something like a contact. I never thought about that.
All right, your turn.
Cool. So I think the next one that I'd bring up is the creation of quick steps inside of Outlook. For me, I know I've talked about some of my different flags that I'll put on email as far as whether it's active or waiting or what have you. But there's the quick steps that were introduced, about 5 years ago now in Outlook, where you can define a set of things that will be done to an email if you have it highlighted and then you click one of those quick steps. So what I'll do is I have 4 standard ones that I create for whenever I'm setting up email. One is to archive clear, archive active, archive waiting, or just straight old archive. And what that lets me do is with a single tap of the mouse, I can take all those steps, and I don't have to do all that work of dragging the email over to my archive. And I also don't have to manually put the flag on it and find that category. So nice little quick step saver. And I have to imagine that for someone like you with all of those many folders for putting emails into, some quick steps for maybe active clients, major projects, and that kind of thing might not be that bad of a step.
So, questions on your quick steps. Are you assigning keyboard shortcuts to them, or are you using the keyboard shortcut normally?
So I am not using the keyboard shortcut for the quick steps. For me, usually as I'm processing through email, I will have my mouse hovering above either waiting or active or clear for what I'm pushing into the archive, and I just use my keyboard to be able to go through the list of email. So my mouse never moves unless I'm just going back and forth between 2 different options, or 4 different options in that case. But it's usually clear, active, or waiting.
Okay. So
that makes sense?
Help me understand quick actions or quick steps versus rules. When would you use a rule? Yeah. When you would use a quick step?
Yeah, I tell you what, so rules are fantastic. They are automatically run against those emails that are coming in. And a quick step is more like a button to push a set of things to happen, whereas the rule is like, if it happens to meet these criteria, automatically do those things. I've been using, flow more and more, and as a trigger for a flow, you can use an actual button that you go and push. And that's kind of like what the quick step is here. It's a button that you can go and push to start some things happening to that email or however many emails you have selected.
Okay. That's true. But you can also manually apply rules to workflow to emails too, right?
You can, and you can create and kind of manage all of your rules and alerts. It's a little bit, so the quick steps are persistent in if you have both your main inbox open or if you open an individual email. The most recent ones that you've been working with are ordered toward the top, so they're very easy to get to. And at least for me, I only have a small handful of them that I'm using here. So it's not, I'm not having to think about what I'm doing or go find anything. It's very front of mind for me and right in front of me visually as well.
Right. And I think one thing that I wish Outlook Mobile had the same quick steps as my Outlook on the desktop.
Yeah.
That way, if I'm checking my email on Outlook Mobile, I might still want to do the same rule. But that's cool.
Yeah, hopeful for a roadmap item there.
Yeah, my next grab bag item is similar to my last one, but like if you have the recurring meetings and you're always getting on the same number with the same people, you also likely are going to frequently need to email 2 or 3 people at the same time for your projects. And so if you work with project teams internally or externally, create groups in your email for them. And that way, I've got different client groups set up where if I need to send it to, to the project manager and corporate sponsor at at a client, I can do that without having to type those. You can also, one thing I regret, just like the quick steps, is those groups that you create in your Exchange in Outlook aren't necessarily available from your phone, even from Outlook. But you can actually create contact groups for iOS. You can create them in iCloud, and by doing that, then you can have the same kind of groups available. What about Android? Is there a easy way to create a group contact?
So I have not tried creating a group contact in Android, so I don't really have a good answer on that one. I'd have to get back to you on it. I am curious though, as you're kind of creating and managing these groups, how are you like either naming them or kind of keeping them straight? Do you try to use a lot of very specific groups, some general groups, and then you pull off individuals that don't belong there? Like what's the workflow on that?
What I would look at is, I just set one up before this. I've got, on a project that we're working on, I've got 3 people that I always email. One of them is the project manager at the client, the technical specialist, and the corporate sponsor. And I frequently find myself emailing them daily. Now, I will occasionally email one without emailing everybody, so I won't use the group then. But in the cases where I do, or here's where it comes in handy, maybe tied into the last tip about the meeting, where you've got the recurring meeting, maybe having the people who are in that core meeting, and then if you want to send a quick follow-up after that, or send the meeting notes out to it, it makes it easy. Make sure you don't forget somebody from the core group.
Okay, that makes sense.
And internally, I've got a team of about 6 people. And so, I very frequently send them an email to the team or invite or updates to our team meetings, that type of thing. So I use it internally.
Yeah, I've only...
And if it's a big internal group or one a lot of people use, I'll get our Active Directory admin to set up an official distribution group. But in the case where it's only me that uses it and it's for a specific purpose, I don't want to do that, because I don't want to get a bunch of junk groups out there that nobody else benefits from. But for me, I will. Yeah,
that's the tip of the iceberg for some of the potential dangers of team sprawl as you start using Microsoft Teams. But I suspect that's another topic for another day.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with Teams. I think it's a fantastic platform, but every time I try and go gung-ho into it, I run into things. The one thing I found is I cannot guarantee that people are going to see notifications if they don't log into the team. And so the problem I have is if I use that, and I do have a team set up for my internal stuff, but I put an important update out to my team, I can't guarantee everybody sees it, where if I send an email to the team, but if it's just a update or something that's not urgent, then I think using the team is my preferred way to go. I also find, for internally it works well. If you ever start getting into external groups that share teams, so you've got your internal company group teams, and then you've got your PTA or your kids Boy Scout group, or whatever what have it. The external access of Teams is really a little bit kludgy right now. And what you'll find is it works on some devices, but not others. For example, Android, you can switch between organizations, but iOS, you can't yet. And so with the people you have that have iPhones, will only see their internal groups. And it also doesn't give you the consolidated view like Yammer does. You have to switch between them. And so that's what I'm saying is it'll get there. And I this last week tried a Microsoft Teams meeting. Skype for Business is going to be becoming Teams, and you can actually if you have the Teams app, you can schedule a Teams meeting. Like, we could do this over Teams, and the sound quality for internal meetings was great. I thought it was actually better than Skype for Business.
Well, it's one of those things where they've, especially with all the announcements at Ignite this year, I think it was Ignite. Yeah. But regardless, the future for Microsoft Teams is going to be very bright. And I think, to your previous point around, are people actually going out there? Are they seeing those updates that are out there? It's because, adoption of Teams, it's just one other place to go right now in some situations, not all, but certainly for some. And for as Teams eventually kind of eclipses that chat-based communication or the one-on-one IM type of communication and then meeting spaces as well, that's going to be less of a problem because people will just happen to be there and they'll see the, alerts, notifications, unread messages in different teams and so forth.
Yeah, I give it 3 to 6 months before it's mature enough to where it probably becomes the indispensable tool. I mean, for one thing, the next round of external access is coming where you can add people that aren't guests on your Office 365, where you can add them with individual Microsoft accounts as well. And once that's there, the other tools like Slack or other tools like that really won't have anything on Microsoft Teams, and add to that, people will start using it for meetings. So as a final grab bag, this Thursday is going to be Thanksgiving in the U.S., a time when people plan meals and eat them. So do you have any productivity tips for, say, meal planning?
I most certainly do. And this is, I'm glad you bring it up because this is one area where I've had a longstanding habit of cooking actual meals, specifically dinner, but I try to do more. And one of the most common questions that I get is, how do you have time, or how do you make the time to be able to do that? So my productivity message for meal planning is to figure out kind of a progressive menu where you're able to use things from previous days in the next day's meal. It's a nice alternative to just simply having leftovers. It feels like something new and something fresh. As an example, I'll make a chili, kind of slow cook that on a Sunday because we're getting into those colder Minnesota months. And then for Monday, I'll add in some cheese and some macaroni to do like a chili mac as the follow-up to that. And then the following day, do like a chili dogs to be able to, reuse some of those same components that were in kind of that day where I had more time to be able to put an actual home cooked meal together. But it's not as big of a production as cooking out a week's worth of meals in advance, because I don't feel like there's enough value in doing it that way.
It's not doing something totally different. So what's your specialty? You got certain go-to stuff that you're well known for?
Well, I mean, my chili is pretty good. I'm not going to lie about that, but so I actually like the breakfast for dinner concept. It's a common Thursday night activity, is breakfast for dinner. And it'll usually involve some sort of like egg scramble or maybe a quiche. Those end up being pretty tasty.
Got it. So I guess using your progressive metaphor, you're going to be seeing a lot of things with turkey.
That is absolutely correct, sir. Gobble, gobble.
This has been ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. You can follow Matthew at his blog, connectingthedata.com, or on Twitter at MC Anderson. You can follow Joel Lindstrom on Twitter at Joel Lindstrom. You can subscribe to the CRM Audio network of podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, or any place else that offers fine podcasts. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC.